Hey, it's Jack. This is a real talk. In real life, I'm laid up with a headache and it's very late and I'm very tired, but I've been wanting to talk about this for so long that I just want to get it off my chest. And when I say long, I'm talking years. Who knows why I've put it off this long? I thought maybe the longer I put it off, the more I could actually prepare for it. But here I am just plopped down and talking. So the topic is this narrative that's out there, which goes something like this: you fall, you break a hip, and you die. Now, the reason why I want to bring up this narrative is I'm going to give you the punchline now, so that if you want to stop listening, you get the point in under a minute. It's not the fall and it's not the hip break that causes the death, okay? It's the frailty. And the frailty has a play in the fall, possibly, but it definitely has a play in the fracture, the level of fracture, as well as mostly in the recovery. Okay, because anyone could fall, anyone could break a bone in some way, which may or may not involve a fall, which may or may not involve, anything to do with age, right? People get in accidents or yeah, just complete unfortunate incidents. So this idea that you get old and you're going to fall, and if you fall when you're old, that you're going to die, makes people afraid of the fall itself or afraid of the hip break. But because I just told you the hip break is not what causes the death, it's the frailty, that if you must be afraid of something, be afraid of frailty. And the hip break itself, the recovery from that will go a lot better if you have a health reserve. Okay, so I know I'm stating some obvious things here, but what I would like to swap out is this idea that if you fall, that you're going to die, and therefore people will be so afraid for themselves, for their parents, of the fall. What you should be afraid of is frailty, if you must be afraid of something. Okay, so let's switch out those fears if we must. But the real, takeaway, or the action, of course, is to become more robust and to build that health reserve. But I really want to explain that there is a basis for that narrative, where it comes from. I'm sure you've heard the statistics. It ranges, but basically it goes something like this: if you're over the age of 50, you have a fall and a hip break, you'll die within a year. So there is basis for this from many different statistics, depending on the cohorts, depending on the age, sex, depending on whether they're talking about dying within 3 months or 6 months or a year. The mortality rates are high, and they're there. So there is a basis for this narrative. The actual statistics will range anywhere from like 6 to 9% if we're talking about within 3 months of a hip break. Up to like 50-60% in just within a year. And then, of course, the mortality rate, still, the risk stays high, even past that 1 year. So for the next 2 years, for the next 5, next 10 years, again, these statistics will change some with whether you're talking about a 60-year-old or a 70-year-old or a 80-year-old, right? That has a fall and a hip break. But I think it's safe to just go with the numbers, either 1 in 3 or 50%. Okay, it's pretty high. But I want to again describe or explain the reasons why this mortality rate is high, and that it's not merely because of a fall. So let's go through some of the obvious across the board the reasons why that after any injury you could have a high risk of death or not recovering. And the easiest ones are because surgery, there's always a risk. And then there's always risks with the post-surgery recovery. There's always risks with hospital stays. Okay, so that goes across the board. Now, when it comes to risks with a fall itself, it could be causing more than just a hip fracture. Sorry. Okay, there we go. It could be you could have, fallen in a way. You have also cerebral hemorrhaging. And then there's what happens, the risks that come because of the loss of function or the immobility that comes when you're, bedridden, right? So you could have blood clots. So all of that kind of are the easy reasons why you would have a high mortality rate. Now, when it comes to older people, there are other things that people don't seem to talk about that much. We have in order to recover from an injury or illness or sickness, whatever it is, you need nutrition, right? So you need to be able to have especially enough protein. And the older we get, the more this is just, with normal biological decline, meaning normal wear and tear, right? There's the entire digestive system will have experienced wear and tear. So that starts from our oral health, meaning, are we able to chew our food, all the way down to, digestion and elimination, right? So if those things are not, functioning very well, then the actual work or the active eating could be difficult, let alone just get enough nutrition out of what you're eating. So it's hard for a lot of older people to eat enough for that reason. And then if you're not eating enough, you're not getting nutrition. So those are some of the reasons why, specifically with the older population, this is an issue. Now, also with the older population, but I hesitated because this happens in this day and age, not necessarily with the older population, but if you have, pre-existing conditions, you have all these morbidities going into, additional injury, then that just ups the risk in unknown factors, right? Because then you have medications, and all of that. Now, what is lesser known, let me go back to what's lesser known or less considered, is that older people, as well as someone, experiencing a long hospital stay, loss of function, all that, there's depression, maybe, even before that, but there's depression that comes into play because you're bedridden, you can't do for yourself what you did. There's also a high chance that you have a loss of social connection due to the loss of function. And then if you are placed in some sort of assisted care or some long-term care facility after, which is also very common, right? Many people never return to their home or independent living after a fall. That's even more cause, for loss of social connection. There's also the stress of the financial burden, not only, like yourself, but if the family is involved in caretaking. These are some of the reasons why the going into a situation where you were frail, and then why it's so difficult to recover from that, because you're not only now more frail, but it becomes just piled on all these different factors. So the statistics have a basis, and the narrative has a basis. Now I want to circle back around to the actual falling part of this and the training part of this. Anyone could fall, anyone could have a bone break, but if we are training in muscle-centric ways, what we're hopefully capturing, or what we should be capturing, besides the all-important muscle mass, right? Muscle mass maintenance, fighting muscle atrophy. Part of the training should take into account your balance, your agility, your fast twitch muscle fibers, right? Your reaction time, your mobility, your flexibility, all these things which will have a factor in how you're able to react to break a fall should you fall, right? And all these things have a factor in creating that health reserve should you go ahead and end up breaking a bone, right? Oh, I'm sorry, of course the big one is osteoporosis, right? And of course the exercise also helps with that, with the bone density. Big one. So bone density. So you add all of this up to, what training offers before the fall, because ironically, the very things that you're supposed to do in order to prevent or help, in the case of a fall, is what you're pretty much banned from doing, right? And we talk all the time about, the getting you into, the surgery right away, and then the rehab right away, getting the activities going right away, and the mobility going right away is so important. Yes, but what are we restoring your mobility to, right? Oftentimes it's like what you consider back to normal in older adults is not a state that they really should have been in the first place, in terms of, again, their robustness and their health reserve. So whatever their status was before, if our goal is to return them to that status, that's also a disservice, right? So for all these different reasons, I wanted to just really drive the point that it's not the fall, it's not the break, it's the frailty, okay? And that all the considerations that we expect, all the biological wear and tear decline that we expect, are all taken into consideration, hopefully before the fact, right? Because we can't hurry up and build bone density. We can't hurry up and build lean muscle. It takes however long it takes, and for most people it's a long process, meaning we want that long runway. So instead of avoiding the fall, right? And yes, you should, put in your anti-slip and all of that. But instead of fearing the fall, let's fear the frailty and do what we can to be robust instead.